is. It's more of a community of journalists, concerned citizens, and also accountability organizations that have come together to ensure that every story is accurate and every story is reliable, so that every information that goes out there, it's something that is already fact-checked. So this is also another sample of how the web connects for Amfani. You can see here it reflects it's benefited by this person. This is the contract that is being given, and these are the lists of individuals. So as a journalist, you can go through all this that is given here, and you can bookmark whatever it is you want down on the page, and then you can come back to it to use it as a story that you would want to write or you would want to give out there to the world at large. So with this few points of mine, I hope I've been able to convince you and not confuse you that Amfani is more than a platform that you can access. It is more of a community and an organization where everybody comes together and creates stories that are accurate and reliable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yar'Adua. Can we give her another round of applause? That was a very exhaustive presentation. Our next presenter will be joining us online, Catherine Angai from the University of Sussex. Is she online? Okay, fantastic. Catherine, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So, really happy to join the meeting this morning. I'm hoping that everything works out as planned. The last time I tried to do a presentation like this remotely, things didn't go as smoothly, but I'm hoping that they do go smoothly today. So I'm going to be, and like with all great researches, it came out of question and looking for answers. I was struck by a gap when doing a bit of research with an organization on anti-corruption in Nigeria over the years, trying to look at the government anti-corruption policies. And what I realized was that just to find Nigeria's anti-corruption strategy online was a hassle. And I really wondered why that was the case. When I finally found it, I found it on the website of an organization that was funded by the MacArthur Foundation. And what they had done was to get the hard copy of the document and to scan it and upload it on their website. And I thought that that was, really odd for people, in Nigeria who, corruption is such a big problem for us. I think, and I said it before in another meeting, that I think that if there was anything, we should be leading, sort of on anti-corruption research as well. And so really this was the reason why this research and engagement with the Yar'Adua Foundation started. We wanted to look at the platform, the Partners United platform that the Yar'Adua Foundation has set up, for collaboration and partnership and sharing best practices on anti-corruption in Nigeria. And what we wanted to do was to look at how to upgrade it, to make it a lot more easier, for anybody who wanted to do research on anti-corruption to engage with. So I don't know which of the screens we're using, Yar'Adua, if it's my own screen that I'm sharing or it's on the Yar'Adua platform itself, so that I know when to go to the next slide.
We're using your screen, so you can just
okay, all right,
presenting.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. So the objectives of this project really was to enhance the documentation platform, that's the Partners United platform, to bring together the different sort of the government's policy, the research that has been going on, the studies, the reports and learning. I think if there's anything that I've heard repeated over and over this morning is the fact that there's a lot of resource, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of data. And if anything, it's just that we need that data in a way that is accessible, in a way that is usable, in a way that, is easy to navigate. And so we want to create that kind of access, to everybody who wants to do any kind of research, engagement, and anti-corruption to have, access to that data. And what we're hoping to do, is that with that access, we're making the platform accessible and making the platform easy to navigate, that this would improve collaboration amongst different individuals, whether you're a researcher, whether you're a student. I saw a cross-section of people in the room. I can see there's a lot of young people in the room. I can see there's NYC people, and I know that there's interest in research. So if you want to research anything on anti-corruption, where would you go to find that kind of information? I think that this is part of what also struck me, that if you wanted to go online now to say, where is a one-stop shop, kind of, where is a database where I can go to and I can find anything on anti-corruption in Nigeria, run by Nigerians, you would not find it. You'll find individual organizations with their individual projects, like has been showcased this morning. But if you want a comprehensive database, that is not present at the moment. And so what we did was that, and this is also part of our lessons learned, is that we conducted first a review of the platform itself, just to see what are the kinds of documents available and, how are they organized and what can we do better. And so we also carried out user testing. And as I'm saying it, I'm hoping that other actors who are working within this space and are using online platforms can also get lessons from it in terms of how, we went about trying to improve the platform, because we didn't just sit down to imagine or to think, how can we improve this platform? But we saw the need and the value to engage the stakeholders, the people that we know would be using this platform, to get their own feedback, to have them navigate the platform. And we were also observing them, the Yar'Adua team did this user testing. They were observing them, seeing how they were navigating, seeing the points where they were finding difficulty navigating the platform, writing those notes down, and, just being aware of that. And apart from that, we also did a heuristics evaluation of the platform. So we got people who were experts in user design and human-centered design, to have a look at the platform, to just give us, again, better insights onto how to organize it and to make it even better. And then the last thing that we did, we also administered a survey to people who are working around policy research. We engage CSOs, we engage government actor also who is interested in research. We engage media as well, and they were all part of the MacArthur Foundation grantees who, were working around policy and research, just to find out from them what are their own research needs and what kind of barriers do they have using online platforms in Nigeria for research. And some of the findings, from this was that we realized that it was important for the platform in terms of usability to improve it, to make it easier to upload and edit information, to organize resources on the platform to make it simple to navigate and make it attractive to users. I think that this is something that, we tend to take for granted as well, in terms of the way that information is organized, whether, people who access our platform can easily navigate it. And then we also saw that there was a need to have a feedback loop, and this feedback loop should be like ongoing, where people who are engaging and using the platform should be able to give us feedback, on ways to improve it, on the usefulness of it. And then also, this is not going to be a surprise to a lot of people, but we do find that technology is an enabler, but it's underutilized despite its potential. And this is a bigger question I think that we can all reflect on at the end of this conversation. I know that people who are going to come up to talk later, and I hope that we can get into conversations about the underutilization of the potential of technology. I have some of these as final reflection questions also at the end of my presentation. So in terms of the survey that I just talked about, what we were trying to find out was that, is there a need really? Are people really looking for information on anti-corruption initiatives? And the answer is an overwhelming yes. Amongst the people that we surveyed, it's a percentage of research personnel within the MacArthur cohort. People said they were always looking for information, or they're often looking for information. They were sometimes looking for information. So that there is an overwhelming need. We wanted to also find out from them what kind of challenges they face with current platforms. And some of them said limited access to recent data. Some of them said in terms of the way the information is categorized. And then some of them said that there was a lack of Nigeria-specific data for the kind of research, that they were looking for. And so, these are really important points, not just for the Partners United platform, as I said, but if you are in the room and you're working, you have a website, an app, I think that you could also, if you wanted to do this practice yourself, or to take this kind of information, seriously as well, into how to improve your own platform. And so we also wanted to find out, how satisfied they are, with Nigeria's current anti-corruption research platforms. And, it's in the middle, fairly satisfied to not satisfied. Just 3, out of those that we surveyed said that, they thought it was good. And so we also wanted to find out why. And some said it was about the coordination of the platforms, the database, how comprehensive it is, and then also limited awareness. And this was also something that I was thinking of, when the presenter just before me, was presenting into how, as organizations working on, these kinds of projects, designing these kind of platforms, I remember how, when we were designing platforms like this, a huge chunk of the resources would usually go on advocacy and awareness, because it's one thing for you to have this platform, it's another thing for people to know that it exists and then to be able to use it. And so there's definitely a conversation to be had about how we engage in awareness raising and, information sharing about, the existence of these platforms. Then there's also people who are interested in corruption cases, and then some think that no platform aggregates these kinds of content in an easily researchable way. So that just reemphasizes, some of the points that have already been made. And then people also shared what kind of information they look for, and that's there. I won't go through it because of time. And so to re-emphasize, sort of the point that I made earlier about awareness, out of the 11 people, 63% of the people surveyed said yes, they had heard about the platform, and then but look at this now, 72% of them said they rarely visited. And so there's also sort of a disconnect there between, so I know that the point I made previous is about awareness and information, but then also there's also that gap between knowing the platforms exist and using them. And there's a lot I think we can still, engage in some kind of research to find, what is it, what's going on. And so, people said what will make it more attractive for them is that it's comprehensive in the types of information that it has, that there's regular updates on the platform, and that there are collaboration tools, for people who want to collaborate with other actors. And so a lot of people said they'll be interested in engaging and contributing. And so what we did was we used this feedback from the users and then form. And so we have like an updated, redesigned platform, which is easier to use, which is attractive, which is simple to navigate. And this is some of the features you can see. You can create resources as an individual, as a MacArthur grantee, if you have done any kind of work on an anti-corruption issue and you want to create visibility for it, you can go on the platform, sign in, and add this to the platform, and you'd have visibility on it. You can have reports, you can upload videos, training materials, advocacy materials, case studies. All of this can be accommodated on the Partners United platform. And some of the improved features, like I said, is that it's now, you can now easily upload information, you can navigate it a lot easier. And then we've also made sure that we've put feedback mechanisms for people who have any issues. They can easily now, reach out to the admin of the platform, to raise these kind of issues, and, they can get responses. And I said that looking to the future now, we have all said, there's a potential for technology. Some people have talked about the infrastructural problems, problems for underserved communities, problems, for people who don't have access to data. All that is there. But, when you look at the current platforms themselves, how do we strengthen them? How do we improve them? There's so much proliferation of some of these platforms, so much information. I think it's in the way that we're able to organize it. And I think the Partners United platform provides that kind of space where information can be organized. I think that there is even potential to have, other people who have, their own platform. Anybody comes and they want to do a research on government contracts, for instance, there's a link, they can just use from that to go there. And so, there's sort of that comprehensive database. And so in sort of my conclusion, I'm asking, questions for reflection from people in the room and, for other civic actors in terms of the barriers they face, using digital platforms for research and collaboration. If, in the discussion, you're able to share that. And then also for people who have these platforms, because I must admit that as somebody who also worked in the donor circle, on my phone, I have apps. I have apps on reporting police brutality. I have apps on reporting sexual and gender-based violence. I have apps on elections. And I know that it has potential, but usage is really low. I'm happy to hear, some of the people reporting their case studies about the number of users they have. But some of these apps and platforms, usage is really low. For some people, they even have to support volunteers who would use the platform, to go and monitor projects and then report back on the platform. So there is a gap there that I think, with more research, you can find out what kind of barriers people face. And then so also what kind of enablers can we introduce? Is this an issue of capability in terms of people not knowing how to use online platforms, or they don't feel motivated, they don't think that there's anything they can do, the platforms will not serve any purpose for them? Or is it opportunity in knowing that these platforms exist and they can use them? And so, this is for me, my brief presentation on what we did with the Partners United platform. It's generating a lot of interest now because we're doing one-on-one engagement with a lot of civil society organizations to get them to use it. But then, like I said, there's potential, but there are gaps. And I hope that our conversation and discussions, can focus on some of this. And so I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for that presentation. I imagine there'll be traffic on the portal from now. Okay, next on the agenda is a panel discussion titled Civic Tech at the Service of Democracy, Good Governance, and Accountability. And I have the honor of introducing our esteemed panelists. First is Hannah Cates. Hannah leads STARE's Open Data, focused on increasing transparency in Africa's political systems through accessible data sharing. Previously head of product at STARES Incorporated, she managed product analytics and data visualization. Her background includes managing digital products at NYC Department of City Planning and teaching Python at NYU Wagner Graduate School. She holds a Master of Urban Planning from NYU Wagner and a BS in Environmental Engineering from Georgia Tech. Hannah will be joining us online. Thank you for coming. Next is Tochi Manager, an entrepreneur specializing in web development and technology innovation. He builds the Partners United platform for knowledge sharing among accountability actors and leads initiatives to grow front-end and UI UX developers in Nigeria. His experience includes leadership roles at Rapid River Software, Vault Noah Limited, and Swift Pro Logistics Services. He holds a master's in electrical electronics engineering from Coventry University. Please join me in welcoming him upstage. A round of applause, please. Next is Dr. Yetunde Anibaba. Yetunde Anibaba is a management educator and organizational development professional at Lagos Business School. She teaches analysis of business problems and decision-making on MBA programs and executive education courses, including problem solving and decision-making for executives and driving digital revolution. Previously working in IT and HR management, she holds a PhD in management and provides advisory services to organizations. She is a member of the Humanistic Management Network and reviews for management conferences. You're welcome, Ma. Ode Friday. He leads Accountability Lab Nigeria, driving initiatives for open government and social entrepreneurship. Through innovative approaches, he has engaged over 1 million citizens in accountability movements. His previous work at Save the Children International focused on strengthening child protection data systems with degrees in mathematics and information technology. He serves on the Media Health and Rights Initiative Board and has received the International Anti-Corruption Excellence Award. A round of applause, please, as he makes you up here. The moderator for this panel is Soji Apampa. Soji Apampa is the co-founder and CEO of the Integrity Organization and Convention on Business Integrity, promoting ethical business practices in Nigeria. He developed the corporate governance rating system for the Nigeria Stock Exchange and currently leads CBI Innovations Limited, aggregating fresh milk from smallholder producers. A former UN Global Compact senior advisor, he serves on the WEF Global Future Council on Transparency and Anti-Corruption and holds a master's in governance and finance. Please, a round of applause.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We need to warm this room up. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It's a really exciting topic that we've got. We've listened to lots of speeches. We're hearing that there are actually barriers to civic action in Nigeria. We're hoping that technology can help us overcome some of these barriers. From, I think it's Kim Pak's presentation, I took away 3 things. That some of these barriers can be classified into transparency barriers, participation barriers, and efficiency barriers. You know, so that's a very good way of looking at these barriers. But what are the solutions? Who has solutions out there? We've seen some. Who's doing what? And how useful is what they're doing? We should look at the successes and challenges that still remain For example, I saw in Catherine's presentation that there's a lack of Nigeria-specific data, for instance, and people also complain of not having access to recent data. So can technology disrupt these barriers to civic actions? Can we really disrupt it? Not just piecemeal, but in a very significant way. And what will that take? I'm hoping that this platform will, this particular discussion will help us address those issues. So perhaps I can begin with Hannah and ask about STAIRS, because I understand that STAIRS have been doing things in elections. So Hannah, can you just maybe very quickly just introduce what you do at STAIRS and how you use technology to enhance democracy? Thank you.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And good morning, everyone. I'm sorry that I couldn't join you in person, but I'm sending my best from Lagos. So I'll start by just giving a bit more context about STEERS as a whole, because I think a lot of people may be familiar with STEERS, but they may be familiar with an older version of STEERS. We're a startup and we've been through a lot of changes in the past few years. So a lot of people are familiar with STEERS as a media company that has been focused on Nigeria. Over the past few years, we've pivoted to become a data and insights company where we're no longer operating as a media business. So we instead have a data platform where we publish data and insights under a B2B business model where we sell data related to finance and investments to help investors and corporations who are investing on the content to inform their decision making. But we do still have a social impact focus, and we are continuing projects that we started earlier in our history, like our coverage of elections, and we have now expanded that to cover elections across the continent. We started with producing Nigeria's very first interactive elections results map back in 2019. We expanded that significantly in 2023, and we were also happy to see that we had more competition in that space at that time with other platforms from Civic and DataFight and others showing the election results. So it was good to have some kind of friendly competition and see other organizations getting involved in that space. So we've now scaled up our election data tracking platform to cover elections across the continent. And we don't just provide election results, we also provide a lot of important context about the history of democracy in each of those countries, historical election results, context on election integrity, where we're aggregating insights from the reports of independent election observers, and also providing data on the age of democracy in each country, the history of term limit compliance in each country. So aggregating a lot of different information to give people a more holistic view of elections and their significance in different countries. And I think this work is interesting because, I mean, first of all, it puts a lot of this information in front of people for the first time in a much more accessible way. Open data on its own and just data on its own often isn't very useful. The important thing that unlocks its potential is showing people the insights from it and making it highly digestible and intuitive and easy to understand. So producing beautiful data visualizations that present the data and present the insights and make it really easy to get those takeaways, that's really essential for unlocking the full power of open data. And what's also interesting with our work on elections is that generally we're not producing any brand new information that hasn't existed before. We're actually just pulling together little bits and pieces of information that are scattered all over the internet and across different websites, in PDF reports, in images of maps of election results, distilling all these bits of information into more structured data that can actually be used. And I think that's a space where there's a lot of potential across Africa, and especially in Nigeria, where there actually is a lot of data that's kind of just lurking in different reports and little tiny bits and pieces. And there's an opportunity to bring that together into more structured data that can be analyzed and presented to tell a more comprehensive story. And tools like AI are only going to make that easier because it's easier to pull little bits of information from large pieces of content and process it very quickly. So that's one area where we've been working on just elections and trying to make elections and democracy more transparent across Africa. And we are also working on other projects related to population data and urbanization challenges that are similarly focused on governance and the public domain, public resource management.
That's great. That's quite a lot that you've described there, Hannah. Perhaps I can ask you a follow-up question immediately. I couldn't help but notice that you said you kept pulling information from PDF files and from paper-based systems. Did I get that right? I thought that we had a lot of data in Nigeria. There's all these open data platforms. Why did you need to do that?
Yeah, so you're pointing out a really important problem, which is that in many cases, government agencies are publishing really useful information in the public domain, but they're publishing it in a format that is really difficult to use. It's in PDF documents. Sometimes it's PDFs of scanned images where it's even harder to extract the text from it. And they're also publishing data in spreadsheets that aren't machine readable because there's a bunch of weird formatting going on, and data sets might be published in a different format every month. The National Bureau of Statistics website has a lot of incredible resources on it, but it's very, guilty of this, where the data sets change a lot, and they're very difficult to read in, like a machine readable format.
Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. Okay, so what we're hearing is that there are some applications, and I think Hannah is also alluding to the use of AI to actually try to get some data out of what we think already is information, or what our government will tell us is information that is publicly available, but it's not in a format that we can use it. Tochukwu, what do you think about this? Because we get the impression that with open government partnership, open data platforms in procurement, open this, open that, that actually it's solved. All we need to do is just develop the applications that we need, and citizens can get the information that they need for civic action. Not so?
Hi, good morning.
Yeah.
So I have I would say, weird view about how AI or technology plays a role in accountability and data gathering. I feel that data is as strong as whoever is imputing that data. I don't know how many of you here have used an AI prompt and gotten back a very wrong message. I have. And so you can't get rid of that human interface where someone or the person feeding in that data has to feed it in a very structured pattern. I mean, if you are into geospatial analysis here, you know that most of the data fed into open systems are very incorrect. They don't match any proper world standard view. So I agree very well with Hannah here that data has to be fed in from a structured point. Unfortunately, people who feed in data into Nigerian systems make it really difficult for any form of automation. So, yeah, so that's for me is an opportunity for growth. That for me is also an opportunity where civic society can tie in a lot of that manpower to help standardize some of this data structure as it's being fed into.
Okay, but are there other challenges that you think that we need to look at? Because if we're really hoping for some level of emancipation through application of technology, what's the barrier in our way? What's standing in the way of society?
So that's a very broad question, unfortunately, but I will try and narrow it down a little. In my experience developing technology for civic spaces, one challenge I face very well is diverse stakeholder needs. You get into a room to have conversations on maybe a particular tech solution, and you find out government requirements.
Recording in progress.
Government's requirements, civil society requirements, citizen requirements are all very different. So trying to build a tech solution that covers everybody's needs, it's sometimes really difficult to come through, and then they have to be trade-offs. And in civil society space, so you can see I'm narrowing down your question to a particular use case. Funding becomes a problem. Projects last as long as the funding lasts. And then when the funding ends, there's no project again. So even sitting here today, I'm already envisioning a partnership between, I wrote it down, between Afana, Follow the Money, and Tracker. Partly because to me, they're all doing the same thing. And Tracker has been gathering that data now for roughly 6-7 years. You'll find it data since 2017. And if you go on their website now, they've actually implemented Power BI, which means they found a way to actually structure that data. And Afana is coming and doing about the same thing, gathering the same data in a very crude way when they could leverage off what Tracker has been doing over this while. So, and again, that helps us, I will just speak opportunity clearly, that helps us break that funding barrier, because if 3 people fund the same project across 3 years, if they put the money together, that's 6 years. So projects now overlive a particular life cycle. Collaboration is greatly improved. They could all come together and form one source of truth. They could end up even being the standard that everybody follows. But again, because they've collated funds together, projects extend past the lifespan. Then everybody here is talking AI. Nobody has talked about how do we improve the people even building this AI? Because AI is, I categorize AI as a living being. The LLMs are currently improving. In fact, LLMs in general are not the LLMs today. They've greatly improved. And as AI keeps growing, as AI keeps building, the people building the tools also have to keep building, keep improving, so that they can keep managing those LLMs or keep building prompts for those LLMs. And AI is beyond chatbots. AI has a deep use. So the challenges are there, the use cases are there. How we decide to implement those use cases in our local environment is a very different conversation, because that now guides us on how we would implement those technology tools, as I would like to call them, and who would consume that technology tool, how would that tool be consumed, and what output do we need to get out of it?
Before I let you go, because I'd like to get to Dr. Anibaba, but before I let you go, let me push you again on this issue of use cases. So we're all used to seeing electricity outages in Nigeria. Where do I get data on that? If I'm going to do civic action against the electricity companies and present data and trends, is there data on outages anywhere being collected systematically, for instance? Yeah.
So I like this kind of conversations. I don't know if this is a space for it, but let's have it regardless. Let's break down that problem. So that's the problem, right? We need to know where outages happen. There's also the problem, how do we gather this data? First of all, who owns that data?
Okay.
Is this data going to be from the GENCOs? Are we going to get this data from the transmission companies, or are we going to get from the DISCOs? Then we have a third level of the problem, which I like to call the downstream problem. Which substation has this problem? Where does this substation distribute? So grid 3, I don't know if anybody here has heard of grid 3. So grid 3 is a funded project, did God's work. That's how I like to call these projects. And gathered out the GENCOs where they are. And then I think there's also data on grid 3 down to the substations. But there's no data down from the substations. Then there's now the part where CSOs become very powerful. Monitoring. I personally would like to have a platform where maybe people go there and tell me, there's no light in my area. And then because we know your area, we can point you to the substation. Because we know the substation, we can now point down to you see, it becomes easy to verify because you've moved from the granular down out. So right now, there's nobody. I don't think there's anybody gathering live information. It's a tool I would like to see, because it's what when I schooled overseas, we could sit in London and see electricity usage around the country. We could even drill down to source, which is coming from nuclear, coal, renewable. That information is not in Nigeria. The challenge there is this. You could build that tool, and maybe I'm going into what shouldn't be discussed here, and government will fight you for it from a visibility standpoint, because you're probably going to be saying, 80% of Nigeria is dark.
Okay, thank you. You've given me exactly what I was looking for, because one of the first conclusions we should have here is that there's really no architecture for the kind of data that we're going to need as civil society. You alluded to the fact in the beginning that what one user needs is very different to what another user group might need. So even for where you all agree on the data and everything, it's very difficult to provide something that addresses the use cases of these different perspectives. So I wanted us to look at the issue, and I'm still going to come back to you, Tochukwu, because I want us to continue on the issue of data. You also talked, I think it was Hannah that talked about, or yourself, about the attitudes, the fact that you can't do it without the humans. So who is responsible? How do we get people, Dr. Anibaba, to start doing the right thing? For example, keeping the records, making the records open, or when these platforms are available, getting the public to actually use it in some kind of social action or action, civic action for change. How do we get that done?
Well, thank you. I'm not sure there's any easy answer to that question. But let me just piggyback on something that he had said earlier. And that is whether there is, first of all, a willingness to collect the data or to release the data, and to whose advantage is it that we have the data, right? And to that extent, therefore, how do you then begin to ask whose responsibility it is to collect the data? Or how do we make sure that we collect the data? I mean, from an academic perspective, or from the perspective of the academia, I think that everyone can attest to the struggle to collect data when you're doing research, right? It's difficult to, when you're doing research that has nothing to do with Nigeria, you get more data more easily than data for research in Nigeria, right? So who's going to collect the data? I don't know. Maybe the academia can play a role by virtue of the fact that we're supposed to be non-partisan, right? And we're supposed to pose no risk to anybody, but I guarantee you that even with that, I was sharing with you earlier that there's some work on gender equality in the financial services industry. And just find that the data of, how many women are in leadership roles, are specific leadership roles and all of that was difficult from the federal regulator that we should have gotten it from, right? And we had to go, to the grassroots to try to collect, I mean grassroots in terms of actually going by ourselves to try to look for this data, comb, what's it called, financial report, annual report, and all of that to try
Recording
to get this
in
data.
progress.
Now, I don't think it is that nobody's collecting it. I think it is that, correction, I don't think it is that people are not collecting certain kinds of data. I think it is that how do you, what's the incentive to release it, right? Especially as you said, then you're going to see that, oh, I'm not doing so well on this, whatever, and I'm going to be exposed, yeah? Never mind that, for instance, the public reports, the annual reports say, oh, we're doing this much in this area, we're doing that. Okay, so can we have the data that led to that conclusion, right? So I think there is a fear of being exposed, right? Whatever that means. And so it's going to make it, if we don't deal with that, even if we send out the most expert data collection, whatever, right? It's going to be difficult to get the data.
Yes.
However, assuming that there's some magical thing that suddenly makes people willing to give data, then I don't even think it is that hard to collect it. Yes, I know you're talking about a framework, but I think that if you think in terms of the agencies that are responsible, for example, for different aspects of our democratic existence, since we're talking democracy specifically, right, and the entire democratic process, then it is not that hard to put that. I mean, we collect NIN data. We collect data from when we go to the banks. We collect, so there is data, it's fragmented. It's now to find who will have the incentive to put the relevant data together, right, in a way that is useful, right, for different categories of people or different stakeholders. I think that's where the crux of the issue is. I'm not sure it is really the collection of the data itself.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Anibaba. But so, Ode, we know that there have been successful use cases. For example, the elections monitoring that we've heard about. What other opportunities have there been that you're aware of where citizens have been able to use technology to leverage their civic action?
Yeah, thank you very much, Soji. So thank you very much, Soji. Good morning, everyone. I think for me, it's also looking what the context of still bringing this on. But I'll go ahead anyways. I mean, I'm not sure if the mic has something against me. But again, I also want to look at the backdrop of what civic tech means and what success really means in this situation. So when you look at, we've talked about the elections, we've talked, I think Anfani Joshua mentioned that. We've also talked about Tracker, fantastic work which we think we've seen all around. But again, the success of all of this lies in between bridging the gap or dividing what civic tech means. So it's easy for all of us to, as innovators, to jump out, to design tools, but without people or citizens using those tools, I mean, there's no success. So we've seen Tracker do the field work. Again, if you go to the communities, you have the field workers, we call them the community frontline associates, we call them community volunteers, but they are the ones doing the work to ensure these tech tools are being used at the community. So they are the success of what we've seen around all of this technology being used. But nevertheless, I'll talk through two things I think I've seen that are good successes for me in terms of access to information when we put the gap between data access and data use. There's one thing to even get the data, there's another thing to use it basically. So we've seen tools like, what's it called? Citizens Gavel, sorry, remind me again, Citizens Gavel, AI, POTUS AI. So POTUS AI looks at, you get this whole data from the community, or you don't even get the data. POTUS AI gives you a platform to ensure that for you to access information, you might not even have an idea of what it is, but you have interest. POTUS AI just gives you another AI tool which you can just feed in the prompts, and it gives you like a drafted letter to access government information. Just my own experience. A couple of days, somebody wrote me a partnership from one of the universities to say, we need you to support us, blah, 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 blah. And one of the things I asked that it's not always money to support any technological program. But I mean, how many people in the room have used Tracker, if you know about Tracker? How many people have used POTUS AI, if you know about POTUS AI? How many people have used Follow the Money's tool or Joshua's and Fanny's connection? How many people in the room? So you see, this is like less than 10%, if I may say. So the point is also ensuring that people the success is when people use these tools and are able to demand the information they want from government. So we need to classify that success basically on tools that are successful like Tracker and Fanny. Again, we from the civil society side, I'm afraid to say this, I think you also said that collaboration needs to happen between all of us. So we don't duplicate efforts to duplicate tools which are already existing. So you see several organizations has this fantastic innovator or tech specialist. He gets out, there's a problem in the community, you develop a tool. Not even going to do your background research. I think No, the previous speaker before
Catherine.
Catherine, one of the findings for the Partners United, we need to also do our background check to understand what is existing and what we can build on. I struggled with one of our programs a couple of years ago, the Accountability Incubator, because when you get into the room and say, young people innovate, we're supporting change makers. I mean, I struggle to define what innovation is and what an idea is, because most things we come up with is already existing. So for us to define success, we need to also build on what everybody is already exploring and what they are doing. But I want to commend Joshua. Thank you very much. It was very helpful for me to sit in this room to see that somebody's already thinking of connecting data from trackers, budget tracker, to what's it called, PBDCs, Budeshi, and PLSI's audit data. We need to connect the dots. We don't need to just access information on different stands. At the end of the day, we're holding government accountable. But to plug all of this together is for the benefit of citizens' engagement and development use as Nigeria grows. We'll keep hearing all of these things every day, but I mean, success for me would be from the citizens' end on the usage of these technological tools. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Friday, for that. Let me ask, this round of questions is going to be, what would it take for us to use technology to totally break through as citizens? We've heard that there are some use cases. We've heard that, yes, there is some data. We've heard that there are challenges. We also heard now from Friday that perhaps if you're going to be successful with using technology to make a change, you have to have people at grassroots. You've got to be able to, you have to organize for it. It's not just the technology and the data, but you've got to have the organization, the coming together of civil society to be able to utilize it very well. But, so let me start with Hannah then, and bring Hannah back in the picture. What do we need for a breakthrough, for the voice of civil society, or rather for civic action to have the leverage that it requires, that the people in government will find it very difficult not to respond, because the data is there, the evidence is there, the grassroots network is there, everything that's power is available. What will that look like? What would that take? How do we use technology to do that? Hannah?
So I think I actually have a fairly contrarian answer to this, where I don't think that technology is necessarily the thing that's blocking us. I think that technology and open data will empower us to collect more data that can hopefully spur action, but the things that actually lead to that breakthrough change are more people-oriented. It's getting that data in front of a bunch of people, which is, like a marketing problem. That's like, partnerships with media and publishers to share information with the public and, build potentially an appropriate level of outrage in cases where there's clear cases of corruption or inefficiency. That's more of a people problem, of getting people to be aware and to care about those issues. And then once you've hopefully built up that level of public attention, there also need to be systems of accountability, of making sure that once we figure out which disco is the one that's really causing issues with power outages, that the people who run that disco are appropriately punished in some way for not performing their function appropriately. So those aren't technology problems; those are people problems and institutional problems. And although I'm very optimistic about what open data and technology can do, it's not going to solve those problems. So I'm really happy about the points that both Tochukwu and Ode brought up about the need for better collaboration and making sure that organizations aren't working on redundant projects. It's really important to make sure that all of that data is coming together so that collectively we're all, focusing on the right problems and getting as much attention on those problems as possible. that's kind of our best chance, and then getting really good like marketers involved to get more people aware of these problems, get them more aware of the tools that are available for them to engage, and hopefully spurring those triggers for consequences for government inefficiency.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Hannah. So Tochukwu, yeah, Hannah says it's not all technology, it's a lot of people problems that we still need to fix, but technology can help, right?
Again, I'm also contrarian like Hannah. I think technology is there. Mr. Mara used to always talk about change theory. We need to identify what's the problem. Sometimes I think civil society problems are like business problems. So you think first of the problem like a product and say, okay, hey, I'm putting this out. Who would use this thing? What problem does it solve? What data can I drive from it? And then before you start thinking, how do I use the data? If I have a tiny dream, I always dreamed that I could go to Tracker and see how the budget of the previous year, first of all, how was it designed? Where is money going? And then I could come back maybe at the end of the year and say, hey, this is how that budget was spent. But that also means I have to get that data, right? So I'll give you an example. I was in Rwanda recently, I think in October last month, and I went to visit a particular hub. I will mention their name here. So they were telling me the impact they are having in policy implementation in Rwanda, especially in healthcare. So they have people across primary healthcare centers in about 3 zones, Kigali, Musanze, and one other zone. And those people feed in data about the public healthcare center. And then they told me, so Tochko, in 2024, when the government was trying to come up with a budget for health, we told the government that their budget was ineffective. And I said, oh, well, how? They said, oh, we found out funding was going majorly to one primary healthcare center, and then we found out there were certain other primary healthcare centers that were empty. They didn't have enough beds. So our policy, because we had gathered the data, we had crunched it, we now understood the data, we could advise government on spend. And then we could also add extra automation. So what was the impact? It reduced the distance for a pregnant woman from her home to the primary health care center reduced from around 1 hour 30 minutes to about 45 minutes. You can see that the solution wasn't tech first. I mean, yes. You could say tech came in the sense that how do we collect this data? I could give so many examples. When we did case, I remember very well that day, it was somewhere upstairs, and then we were saying, okay, fine, we will build a mobile app, right? Everyone said yes. And then we now went, what if that day internet goes off? And then we're like, oh, fine, we're going to now make it offline. Let's make the app collect data offline. And then we went, oh, if the app collects data offline, what if the person's phone goes off? And we say, oh, yeah, let's do SMS. So you see, the tech is always there. The technology is always there. But there has to be someone thinking through the product, the problem, and then designing solutions around that problem so that the desired result is still gotten. So I don't believe technology is a hindrance. I just think that there hasn't been no, that's wrong. I think there's been a will to use technology to solve problems, but I think there has to be more innovation around the will to solve those problems, that everybody is not building the same tool, like he said, trying to solve a singular problem when that problem has too many heads, and we could all contribute to the different parts of the body to actually make it work. That's my thinking.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Tochukwu. So Friday, do you have your definition of innovation now? Because it sounds like if we're going to look at the topic, innovating for accountability, that we should not reduce it just to technology. Do you want to speak to that?
It's fine. I think innovation in Africa is, I think for me it's quite difficult because, again, first thing would be that most of the times we have donor funds or you have tech for good, which means you are supported to solve a solution, solve a problem. Then you design that to, if you look beyond what has happened in our space in the last 10 years, I'll ask a critical question, which I always ask myself is, how many tools have survived 3 years? When that person started, it was innovation. Again, why I said Africa, if you connect that to, it's not the standard. I mean, if you look at the kind of Elon Musk, we've struggled over the years. I think the Minister of Innovation and Digital Economy has done well in his project 774 to install fiber, all of that. But Elon Musk just came in with Starlinks, which you can connect from anywhere. Right in my village, I could buy one to Rome. So for me, that is innovation at the extreme. But I mean, we can have that deliberation over time. But I mean, within the accountability space, it's been quite exciting to learn, not just see colleagues or just to do that for the work we do. Maybe, I mean, I'll have to speak to you on what Creative Commons means at the end of this event, because looking at what this means for me again is, he was just talking about budget tracker and all of that. How do we begin to create open source softwares where we can all access? Because again, the challenge for me still remains, it's that organization that has it. You might need a partnership or a collaboration to access that data. But again, if I want to develop something in, for instance, in my village, we now talk about local government accountability. How do we replicate what we have? If budget doesn't cover, or that data fights, or Yar'Adua doesn't cover a community or a state that we're already working in, how do I replicate what you're already doing instead of creating something new? If you look at what has happened with NSAS, the technology we all had with the fundraising one, GoFundMe. It's a common tool which we all have. Like, everybody has access to it, but it works for everybody collectively. So it's a collective, we need to begin to see things from our collective action, collaborative efforts, to see that innovation is not just me and you, but innovation is for the public good, to see that we're addressing issues that lie in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Friday. So, Dr. Anibaba, back to my initial question then. Do we need some kind of architecture, some kind of, common vision, if you like, for this collective action? Because I think all the players need to see how they plug into some collective and how they can contribute towards that collective for us to work together. And what role is there a leadership role that the academia can play in that?
I don't know if you do that intentionally, the collective part of it. But Lagos Business School is actually involved with the ministry as well as CJID and it's going to be BIOS organization, data science, right? And the idea is to kickstart an AI collective. It's specific to AI, but it's the idea of the AI collective.
I didn't know anything about that.
And the idea of the AI collective is actually to try to pull these things together, right? Different innovations, research, developments, incubation hubs, and things like that, so that everyone has a central, I can see what other people are doing, how do we collaborate, and all of that, right? From the research perspective, which LBS is driving, one of the things that we hope to be able to do, as we've already mentioned, a lot of this hangs on funding and all of that, but one of the things we hope to be able to do is actually to establish a hub of sorts, a knowledge hub, where you can tell who is doing what, when, how, where, who are they reaching, and all of that, right? Now, again, that still appears to be a short-term thing. It's supposed to be a 3-year thing. What happens after that, right? That's always the question. What happens after that? But I do think that it has become critical that that happens because, indeed, as you noticed, as the young lady was sharing about Amfani, I was saying, tracker. Doesn't that, and all of them, I was saying to myself, all right, how do we begin to harmonize these efforts, right, so that we're able to solve problems at a larger scale than we're currently doing? And nobody, well, don't let me say nobody knows, but there's a lot that you don't know unless you come to a forum like this.
Yeah.
You don't know, right? Unless you come to, and how many people are going to come to a forum like this, right? And so I think that, and I hope it's one of the things that at the minimum, the AI Collective will be able to kickstart, right? And, but I wanted to speak to something you said earlier about, the problem issue.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm very aware of the fact that many tech innovation hubs and organizations and initiatives use, if you like, a human-centered design approaches. What I wonder about now is, does it really go end to end, or are we more excited about our innovations than we are about the problem that it's supposed to solve, right? And until we shift from, again, like Anna also said, shift from the love for our innovations to the desire to solve the problems, we're going to have these individual things going on and everybody excited, oh, I've done this, yeah, you look at me here and all of that, as compared with actually being able to say, this is the problems we have solved, let's move to the next one. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Tochukwu did talk about us productizing these things, turning them into products. Maybe sometimes we need to keep a view on the entire process, end to end, that how do we just get that problem resolved? But I also hear the issue of sustainability, and I ask, and I wonder whether there's no room for social enterprise somehow, because it seems as though these things you have to raise capital. It's not just wait for donor funding cycles, but somehow you have to be well-resourced enough and find a way to also keep it going and align incentives. So those who own the capital are willing to keep bringing the capital. I know there could be problems with that, but maybe Steers has a formula because I know that Steers, they are for profit, although they have a not-for-profit angle as well. So Hannah, could you maybe very quickly just give us some kind of concluding remark around sustainability?
Sure, yeah. I'm glad you brought this up because I was planning to bring it up as well. One area that we haven't talked about so far is leveraging opportunities where the private sector would be interested in these types of data and these projects where it would benefit them as well. The example of tracking the electrical grid outages, I think, is a perfect example of that, where that's a data set that would have real commercial viability because businesses are trying to decide where to site new facilities and new stores and hospitals and all of that, and they're trying to optimize their operating costs. And they would rather site their facility in a neighborhood that has a higher number of hours on the grid every day so they can minimize their diesel costs. And that's an important thing that would feed into their operational costs and capital allocation decisions. So I can definitely imagine, businesses, especially large businesses that are, planning distribution across cities, being really interested in funding that kind of data collection so that they have an understanding of where it's going to be the most cost effective for them to operate. And yeah, and those are examples of the types of partnerships where you might be able to get creative funding from the private sector to produce data that also has really strong public social impact as well. And for Steers, we're following kind of a similar model with that. That our open data team that I lead is grant funded, but when we're looking at projects, we are also considering which projects might have some commercial value in the data that we're producing and exploring, because that helps us make the case for subsidizing some of the costs of that data production from the commercial side of our business. And that's ideally, part of our long-term goal, that the commercial side of our business subsidizes our social impact work on open data. So one of our projects that we're doing right now is digging into all of the different population estimates for Africa to try to figure out how many people actually live here, which has really important commercial value to it, as well as all of the humanitarian and social impact benefit. where businesses are interested for market research and planning their future growth and distribution. So that's an important angle to think about with these projects of what kind of commercial value could be generated from this data as well, and what kind of private sector partners could we bring in to help finance them.
Okay, Friday, then thank you very much, Hannah. Then Friday, I'm going to come to you very excitedly about what if the outage was a lack of corruption? Outage, instead of it being no power, it's no corruption. And we're able to get data on the places that have low corruption, LOW. Could there be a business? Yes, because in the end, we have to find a way to actually fund these activities. And the business climate is a big issue for businesses to decide upon before choosing where they're going to site offices, site projects, and so on. And a lot of money goes into all of that. What do you think? Sorry, I'm being provocative here. Yeah.
So this is a tough one. But again, I mean, in my head, I was just thinking about the Lagos-Calabar road. Interestingly, how many of us are aware of that? I was just thinking, we have said they are going to spend 15 trillion for that road, but how many of you have ever bothered to say we are going to engage the government? Like, we can't do anything, right? You know, so that's the thing we find, the disconnect. Second experience for me would be, how many of us use Facebook or Twitter, X for free? Even Instagram. You have an account. If you look at the business model for those social media platforms, you can easily open an account. You can browse, you can connect to people. Just a couple of days, I had the connection between X was being developed to promote freedom of expression. Go there, express your thoughts, your opinion, and also associate people. That's why you can follow people. But the business case for them is when you want to do adverts. So there's a tool, fantastic. Let's say there's no corruption, but there's a smaller part which engages on that business case. For me, I will look at the Nigerian context on how we develop all these tools for free. But I think Stairs might have unlocked it because they have a business case where for you to access some, so I think your DataFed has that as well. You have a free platform, basically, but I mean, you have a tool which promotes information access, which you have to pay for. So for me, that will look like, in the context of our communities, it might be a tough one to engage citizens in that space, to say, pay for this data or that data, which makes it tough. I'll probably use Netflix as another example. So many fantastic movies, but once you open an account, you have to have a monthly payment. So for me, looking at what citizens are able to buy in, what interests them, and how they're able to commit to that information access. For me, it's the information access that draws the line on what interests citizens. We can develop so many fantastic tools. That's why you find out people are not aware of different tools in existence, or what tools are not working, or what it is. But it's out of interest. You need to buy citizens' interest to see that at the community level, they are willing to pay for what you are willing to give them.
Okay.
I hope that works.
Yes, Dr. Anibaba. I want to give Tochukwu the last word this round, but Dr. Anibaba, yes.
Right? Okay. I think we actually having a conversation earlier about the fact that people are jaded when it comes to matters of government and all of that. So when you talk about engaging, for instance, on this Lagos-Calabar matter, it's almost like, so what will I do with it next? You know. So one of the things that we were saying earlier also was perhaps the need to do research that helps us understand, it's not even perhaps, as I said to you earlier, it's one of the things that I'm hoping to do very soon, right? But to do research that helps us understand how people engage with technology in Nigeria, right? how people engage with these civic platforms and why they engage with it, right? And maybe use some behavioral science perspectives, nudge and all of that to see how do we drive adoption, not for the sake of adoption. If we having established all of the bits about is actually solving a real problem and all of that kind of stuff, right? What are the barriers? You would think that people would be interested in what, Lagos to Calabar, you're spending 15 trillion. Where is that coming from? But again, what is going on there? For which reason, even if you put it on I was also saying earlier that when you look at all of the nice budget, graphics and all of that, the best you do is put it on your WhatsApp status and say, can you imagine what these people are doing? Next.
Yes.
Right? How do we go from that level of seeing it to engaging with it and taking action with it? Right? What is going to make that happen? I really think it's serious work that we need to do. Otherwise, we're going to continue with our many different fora and all of that and talk and talk and talk. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Tochukwu. You. Okay. I'll let Friday just jump in very briefly, and then.
Just thinking about what she was saying again, it's also to look about the creativity in our platforms. I think when the colleague from Data Fight was presenting, she was talking about the interactive platform. And the situations I mentioned about Netflix and Twitter and Facebook and all of that is the creativity that enables people to engage. So if you find out, like the MacArthur Foundation, one of the things grantees within that platform have done is like using films, music to engage. I mean, accountability issues is boring. We must accept that. We just have to accept. That's why people will not attend to a 15 trillion contract. Even the yesterday's approval, it's just going to be on the news on the government have approved the loan of 1.5 trillion. I mean, it's not interesting for young people, but how do you make that interesting is by using films and music and all of that creativity to engage them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, in closing then, Tochukwu, innovating for accountability, enhancing democracy through technology and civic action. How do we sustain such a combination of technology and civic action? What do you think?
Okay, so thank you for giving me the last statement. I will piggyback on what Doctor said. I will just tweak it a little. I don't think building an AI collective is the best approach. I think building a technology collective is the best approach.
Okay.
Why niche it? I mean, open it up. I was discussing with a colleague and he told me, hey, so a particular organization is building a tool and they decided to use C#. And what came to my head is, how many C# developers do we have in Nigeria? So it's going to die. So what does the technology collective do? In school, my final year project was on monitoring water distribution systems in the West Midlands. So it was sponsored then by Severn Trent, which was a water company. They funded the school. The school did the project. We gave them back the research. Same thing can happen in Nigeria. We have tons of research that lie or die in computers. So how do we move forward? It really depends so much on where we intend to fight the war. Do we want to start the battle with the educated Nigerians? Do we want to educate the uneducated Nigerians? It changes the approach of everything. So Nigeria elections and states are doing something very wonderful. I wish they would collaborate. I also think that it would make sense that in elections, we see election campaigns in local languages. That's what AI can do. So the technology is there, but there's a missing piece of that technology. You can't convert English to, say, my mom's dialect, Bete, in Ogoja. Bete is not inscribed anywhere. So it means somebody has to do that transcription. Somebody has to feed that model. If feeding that model is going to take time, then somebody does the easiest one, which is do the regular transcription from English to this, convert it to a graphic design, then use existing tools to propagate. So the technology is there. How we intend to use or implement that technology to solve life's challenges, especially in Nigeria, is a different conversation altogether. But we can't do it in silos. We can't do it without having so many open source projects. Even as I like to speak from a technologist point of view. If we, I'll go back to an example. So when we built Case, we picked up 2 open source programs. One of them helped us do sentiment analysis on Twitter, Facebook. Mr. Mara, I can't remember the name of that software anymore, but it was funded by a school in the US and it was free. So we picked it up, we rebuilt the tool, although because it was deprecated, so we brought it up to speed. And then the second one that we picked also was open source, and then we built on top it. In fact, some of the developers who built that particular project contributed to the parent project and got stars from there. So incentives have to come. They have to, I think open source makes sense because it allows people contribute. It even allows you put your problems. If you see foreign tools that we leverage upon, there are so many foreign packages that we use. They put their problems, and then someone somewhere around the world will just build and tell you, hey, this fixes your problem because it fixes my problem. And then you can keep iterating and iterating. So technology is there. I encourage everybody to participate and be, MacArthur calls it voice actors. We should, as much as possible, be voice actors to our collective problem. It's our collective problem. We can't run away from it. We'll keep looking at it, but we all have to contribute to it. So for me, one thing I'm taking away from here is I've heard about Afani. I'm going to check Afani out. I've heard about Nigeria elections. I'm going to look at Nigeria elections, if not for anything, out of curiosity, and also see how all of that also forms in improving my perception of what people are doing in this space and how I can also plug myself in to see how that space can improve. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Okay, it's my turn to fiddle with the microphone. Okay, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We can see that, yes, the biggest thing we need is the innovation, not the technology. The technology is there. I think that's what we're learning from the panelists. The technology is there. The data may not all be there, but we're on our way there. And we can get there, issue of data. However, on the issue of solving problems for our common benefits, it's still back to us. We have to be willing to work together. We have to have some kind of creative commons, or maybe innovations commons, where we're willing to share with each other, but we're also at a point where we need to think about sustainability, that it's not everything can be cap in hand. Go looking for which donor will fund something. We have creative about raising capital, because it's very capital intensive, not just for today, to sustain it into the future. So we have to do a lot more work around discovering stakeholders with the right incentives, with the right backgrounds that can be part of the project and can part finance because there's something they can gain in return, and so on, and having one part being totally free, another part being revenue generating, and so on. So I think that we need to be innovative on every single aspect, from the creating the solutions to sustaining the solutions. We have to think innovatively to achieve that. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause. Thank you, Hannah Cates, online. Thank you to Chuku. Thank you, Dr. Anibaba. And thank you very much to Friday. Thank you indeed.
And thank you, Mr. Soji, as well. Please stand for a group photograph. And I think while that is being done, I there was something that Dr. Yetunde said that really stood out to me. She said, okay, yes, Hannah, can we have Hannah on the screen? Nice. Okay. She said, are we more excited about our innovations than we are to solve our problems? And that really struck me because it feels like people just want to keep bringing technologies instead of looking at the existing ones and trying to see how we can make them better. So thank you so much again for that impactful discussion. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Amina Salihu, the Deputy Director for MacArthur Foundation, for her closing remarks. Please, a round of applause for her.
Many thanks, my sister Halima. Good afternoon, distinguished Nigerians and friends of Nigeria. What a day, what a moment. I have learned so much. And on behalf of the MacArthur Foundation, I'd like to thank all the colleagues who have spoken today because they have in different ways and collectively inspired us. MacArthur Foundation has been in Nigeria for 30 years. This is our 30th year. And we've always recognized that the change we seek would only be found by Nigerians leading to find those, growth milestones and development markers that they seek. A philanthropic organization like MacArthur would only follow that energy and enable Nigerians lead in terms of where they want to get to. In Yoruba, you would hear it said that, we're going to need everybody. We're going to need each other to pull together to achieve what we want to achieve. And in our 30th year, we went back to Nigerians to ask, we have done accountability work for the last 8 years. What's the next most pressing, if you will, lever for change that Nigeria and the African continent should probably be looking at? And increasingly and every time, certain things have stood out. One is in terms of the location of young people and how young people have the energy and the drive, if given enough opportunities to drive the change we seek. They are the solution, not the problem. Second is in terms of the role of technology. Technology as an enabler, as a driver, not as an end in itself. In other words, we're learning, because the conversation today is focused on technology, that technology is not good or bad normatively, but neither is it neutral. Because the technology we have is also infused by the mindset and the worldview of the designers. So it depends on whose hands it is in. It's not good, it's not bad either, but it's neither neutral. As I was listening to all of the excellent conversations today, there were certain things that further stood out for me that I want to leave with you today. First is the power of partnership. Where's my brother Amara? Because I want to particularly salute the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Foundation and Center for increasingly becoming the home of impactful convenings every time. And we come here, oh yes, that's for Yar'Adua anyways, it's not for MacArthur. And every time especially in this particular hall, there's something important you take away about the ways in which we can all bring our assets together and connect them and achieve more. And as a donor, I'm further convinced that what we call the cohort approach at the MacArthur Foundation, and there's so many MacArthur partners in the room. May I please ask our partners here present to please rise, the MacArthur partners present, because that is how you evidence and you reference the fact that, thank you for applauding them. Thank you, please be seated, thank you. Not one of us is enough, not one of you is enough to drive this work, but pulling together, we can look each other in the eye and form that community of practice, which is, I think, what I've heard us sketching around since this conversation. If we have a community of practice, then we're clear, this is who we are, this is the practice around a particular issue, this is the way we want to behave around this issue. And so technology presents solutions, it also presents problems that we need to tackle. In looking at that collaboration, we also can't just look at civil society, we also have to think about government. However rudimentary, however fledgling our government might be, it has a role. And we cannot usurp that role. And we'll probably go further if we identify those people, my brother Soji will remember that we call champions of change. There are people in government who are willing to listen, who want to know how to do things better, and we cannot shut them out because we have given up. We cannot give up on this country. Nigeria is too big and important to be given up on. The second thing that I would like to share today is around, I think we're going to have a need for conceptual clarity. And as a donor, that jumped out at me quite early, wearing my civil society hat as well. Because when we say data, what exactly do we mean? If we're going to step out of this room, like has been said by my sister, Dr. Anibaba, where else are we going? We're going to have to engage with people who need to understand, like they say, all the Igilango Turanchi that we are speaking in this room. As important as all of that is, we've got to break it down to people's level. So what does data look like? What is data? When we talk about innovation, what exactly are we talking about? When we say civil society, what is civil society? Because the private sector is an integral part of civil society, anything that is out of government. And so finding those new partnerships is very, very important. And those partnerships already exist. But sometimes we think that the doors are shut. But if the door is shut, pull it open. That's what a door is for. It's either open or it is closed, but you have to engage the door for the door to yield. And we have to make sure that those doors begin to yield. So we have to be clear exactly what we mean and what we're talking about. Third is something we have learned so well at the MacArthur Foundation. That's the fact that this work before us is not going to be a revolution. It's not going to happen all of a sudden in a very big way. Change, especially of a social nature, happens incrementally, and it takes time. So let us be very kind to each other and recognize our gains, but also let us be sure that we build upon our gains. Because the nature of the space is such that if you winked, if you shut your eye for a moment, that gain is eroded. So we must be very conscious of the gains we have made, and we have to build on those particular change. Fourth, communication continues to matter. I think we have an assumption that because we're doing digital work, it's all out there, people will understand. No, people still need to have communication. They need to understand what we're trying to say. The entire large language model is premised on the English language, and I've heard, I think it was my brother Tochku who made the point today about, look, what language are we using? Who understands what we're trying to say? And I was very inspired by the fact that each time we described a new tool, it's an African language, whether it's Nubia. We didn't talk about Nubia today, my brother Joshua. Whether it's Nubia, whether it is Amfani, whether it's Budeshi, these are Nigerian languages. Now, that's a good start, but we have to take that further. Because access is going to be an opportunity, and access is not just financial. It's also in terms of our ability to connect with the life stories of people, and that lies in language. So we have to demystify this, first of all. But recognizing that people are not a homogeneous category. I mean, there's so many of us in this room, we are intersectional beings in different forms, and we have to think about all of those intersections. And I think it's going to be the role of philanthropy to support ideas, to see how we can therefore ensure that this happens. Behavior change certainly is going to be needed. I know my sister Catherine is a behavior change guru, and she's still online. But what we're learning with behavior change is that it's one thing to identify the problem. But when you identify the problem, you're just telling people it can't be done. You have to move forward and identify solutions. Development partners will fund a study that helps you understand the problem, but they would not fund the problem. Because understanding what the problem is a means to an end. What will be funded is the solution to that problem that we have identified. And I think it's about time that we began to focus, as has been said, on what some of those solutions might then be as much as possible. Let's continue to talk to each other. I'm always proud to say that our grantee partners are the first 11, because you saw them rise earlier, and whatever the field in which they're working, if anybody's going to support anybody in that field today, we cannot leave out our first 11, and so we're very super proud of what it is that you're doing. The final thing I'd like to speak to is my brother Friday's point about, he called it Creative Commons. My brother Soji called it Innovative Commons. And I think what we're talking about really is our commonwealth, because there'll be different ways in which we have to co-own this thing. And I think we had been making an assumption that all of this work was social enterprise. But today, a very fundamental learning for me. Even if it's social enterprise, which means you're making money, but it's not for profit. You're plowing it back and you're doing more. But you need to have that seed grant that helps you even jumpstart and innovate and do what you need to do? And if that's the case, would it be a very strategic thing for colleagues in this room to be saying to philanthropy at this point in time that we need to aggregate resources? We need to bring together people even much more. Let me close with the way I had started, about collaboration, about pooling energies, and always looking back. And that's the way to measure success. Success does not mean starting a new thing every time or finishing off something. It's asking ourselves the question, we have come this far. We salute what we have achieved. What's the next important thing that we need to do? And that's why I'm very proud of Partners United. And the point that Catherine had made, and I think Anna, about always reviewing and relooking. And that search engine, we can ensure that it's a whole lot better, because it is where we hope to domicile all of our work and also get more people engaging and working together. So, on behalf of the MacArthur Foundation, I'd like to thank you this afternoon and ask you to please keep the ideas coming as long as they're focused on solutions for our people. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amina. It's always refreshing to hear you speak. And I'll just echo the things you said. Partnerships, she said kindness too, and that change is incremental. So thank you so much to our partners and to our attendees for coming, making time. And by the power vested in me, I hereby declare this convening closed. Thank you. Lunch, yeah.